We have lived through one of the most blessed Super Saturdays in Eurovision history because all three songs in this video are absolute bangers, all in different ways, and they were all selected within hours of each other. Every Eurovision fan is going to be familiar with the feeling of having a massive favourite in a national final that then loses in heartbreaking fashion to something that is absolutely mid, a total nothing burger, if you will. Luckily, in none of these shows did that happen, and instead we have a contender to win Eurovision, and also one of my favourite Eurovision songs of all time. Today, we're talking about Denmark, Estonia, and Lithuania. Before I get into that, we have to do the standard thing, which means you have to subscribe to the channel, you have to like the video, you can follow me on Twitter, you can follow me on Instagram, you can follow my editor, Jay, on Twitter as well, if you like. Don't forget as well, we have the Patreon, if you'd like. You get thanked at the end of the video, and you'll get to see videos like this one a day early. Right, now I've got all that out of the way, I cannot believe I'm about to say this. I'm going to be nice about Denmark. I'm not going to beat around the bush here. My opinion of Denmark and Eurovision is not very good. In fact, just 7 days ago in my last video, I said this. Denmark is the family embarrassment that gets locked in the cupboards when family are around because they keep setting things on fire. So I wasn't hugely optimistic about this show this year, but I have to say it was an improvement, and they made one big change that I thought is really important. What they did for this year was move the show into a much smaller venue. For years, it's been in this huge cavernous room with no atmosphere. Whereas this year, I think it really paid off because the stage looked great and almost distracted from the fact that they've been using the same stage-ready sound since they hosted the contest in 2014. Seriously, Denmark, it's time to move on. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the songs, and we're going to start with Sand by Saba. Something I have to get off my chest with this song right away. This intro really reminds me of Molly Pettersson Hammer's song I'll Be Fine, which participated in Melfest a bunch of years ago. It was totally robbed because the app didn't work in the semi-final and she didn't even make it to the second chance round. So that was a disgrace. All that aside, the Melfest reference is actually kind of apt because this song really sounds like the sort of song you might hear in Melodifestivalen. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just means that it's a well-produced pop song that has that kind of vibe. The song also doesn't have the typical songwriters like Thomas Gison, Jimmy Joker Thornfeld, and so on that you'll see in Melodifestivalen. Who it does have is Melanie Weber, who famously gave us the worst song of all time. The thing is, and this is what is very on Denmark about this is actually one of the best songs out of any of the Scandinavian national finals this year. I prefer it to most of the pop songs I've heard in Melodifestivalen, although I should say we haven't yet heard the last semi-final yet. I probably prefer it to pretty much any other song I've heard except for Gorta's song in Norway, and you'll have to go and watch last week's video if you want to hear about that. Overall, it was a nice, well-produced package. The hook is really strong. The vocal is excellent. The staging really elevated it. And again, I was talking about changing the room, changing to a new venue. This is why you do it. They had a way better stage that enabled a performance as good as this one. Unfortunately, the quality level was not sustained because we went from that to this.
Are you guys ready to go? Okay, let's do this. Woo! We're on the highway chasing cakes like zoom.
God, where do I start with this? Look, okay, the song was called The Chase. It was by an artist called Choo Choo, and I'm going to try and be positive first. The good things about this included that it had a really interesting set of influences, clearly from K-pop and J-pop, and this is actually an underheard sound in Eurovision, in my opinion. There's definitely a lane for it. There's definitely a space for it. I would really love to see more songs with this influence coming through over the coming years. Sadly, this song is not it. It was never going to be it because it feels so disjointed. It feels like they've taken a bunch of bits they had and sort of sellotaped them together until they've ended up with this kind of Frankenstein-style hot mess. And unfortunately, Choo Choo's vocals were...
I saw you with her, kissing her neck on Avenue 5, always saying you're...
not exactly the best. Overall, it's a complete disaster bop. It was always going to be dead on arrival, and while I am ashamed to admit I do have a bit of a soft spot for this, it was never going to go anywhere. Next up, we had Basim with his song Johnny.
Tell me why they only bring flowers with it. Can move or get out of your bed. That's got a mess.
Now, you may remember him as We Have Bruno Mars at Home from Eurovision 2014. You may also remember that he had a giant curtain which helpfully broke in the middle of the live show.
Another cliche love song.
Anyway, he's here, he's back, and he's bringing us unadventurous, middle-of-the-road pop. Something to clear up quickly, that staging is just Maps by Leslie Roy. In fact, to be honest, the song kind of also sounds a little bit like Maps by Leslie Roy, although I can say at least Basim, unlike Leslie Roy, can sing in tune. The main problem we had here is that this song just sounds so generic, and in fact that's part of why it sounds so much like Maps, because they're both generic pop songs that we're never going to go anywhere, and I think that's a shame. It's especially a shame because the lyrical content of this song is actually really interesting and actually quite moving. This is a song that is about a man on his deathbed in a hospice, and Basim is singing about why we only bring flowers to people who are about to die. That's a really touching and serious message, and unfortunately, I just feel that the song that was built around that didn't quite do it justice. Don't get me wrong, I really appreciate the effort from Basim here, and it was a nicely performed song. I just feel like there was a lot more that could have come from him. Next up was Ublu. Their song was called Planetary Hearts, and it sounded like this. No, I said Ublu, not Nublu.
Planetary hearts spinning round and around, chasing the night sky.
Anyway, speaking of artists from the Finnish national selection this year, Ublu kind of felt a bit like a yassified Cyan Kicks. I should say that's a good thing because Cyan Kicks are great. Their song, meanwhile, was a kind of Grimes does Eurodance sort of vibe. Again, for me, I kind of dig that, so it was good. Both the song and the visuals were striking, they were memorable, and that made it feel really quite out of place in a Danish selection where usually those things do not make an appearance. Again, I have to say it was really refreshing, and the fact that this came amongst a field of songs that were enjoyable really shows how much of a step forward they've taken this year. Just a couple more to run through quickly. Firstly, we have I Need Your Love by Janus Viberg.
I need your love.
Every time I read this song title, it just makes me think of I Want Your Love by Edward Romanusa. And by the way, I still love that song, and I will not let any of you bully me into silence for speaking the truth. Anyway, I really feel for Janus because imagine, after all of that work, putting the staging together, you tune into UMK the week before, and guess what? Sarah Siepeler has done your staging 1,000,000 times better than you ever could. In any case, it looks like the giant light bulb industry is doing really well this year. We can call it a flash sale. As for the song, while I can get on board with a park and bark male ballad every now and then, this one just doesn't do anything. It's just such a nothing burger of a song. And because of that, there's very little of interest I can point to. There's a nice swinging light, there's some nice vocals, he sings very well. Okay, well done. What else is there? Nothing, so let's move on. Finally, we had Aura Dion with Mirror Ball of Hope. And to be honest, this gave me a lot more questions than answers, so let's run through them. Firstly, why is she a mermaid? Secondly, did he really have to tick off that many Eurovision tropes all at once? Bisexual lighting, pretending to play the guitar, giant disco balls, the slightly bizarre waving arms dance, which is all she's able to do because remember, she's a mermaid and can't move her legs. Finally, we have some random opera singing thrown into the bridge to try and elevate a really, really mid song. And then immediately after that, she sheds the tail and she slides down the disco ball. One more problem here, the lyrics are absolutely terrible. Seriously, some of the worst that I have seen this entire Eurovision season. Mirror, mirror on the wall, tell me there is hope for all, made me want to throw my TV out the window, and don't get me started on take my hand in the name of love like a mirror ball of hope. What does it mean? What does that mean?
What does it mean?
Seriously, what are you saying? Who wrote that? Point is, the whole thing was a hot mess, so let's just move on to the results. We had a final three of Saba, Bruno Mars, and Park and Barkman, of which Saba came out on top. The slightly awkward element of this is that Saba came third with the public vote, but won because of the jury. I always find it a bit strange when something like this happens, because it doesn't sit right with me when the winner of the public vote doesn't end up going to Eurovision. At the same time, this was definitely the right choice, and quite frankly, on this occasion, the juries saved Denmark from itself, which was trying to send two middle-of-the-road, dull, dead-on-arrival pop ballads over a song that actually has something about it. That leads us on to Saba's qualification chances at Eurovision this year, and to be honest, I'm pretty optimistic. Saba is in semi-final 2, which is definitely the weaker semi-final at the moment. I mean, seriously, go and look at the first half of semi-final 1. It's terrifying. And though this isn't the most adventurous song, it's performed well, it's staged well, it's sung well. So I actually think Saba has a really good chance. One thing is for sure, and that is that we are miles above the yassified Barbara Pravi effort from last year. Overall, can't believe I'm saying this, Denmark, you've done a good job. I'm really excited to see where this goes. One more thing I just want to add as well, which I think is important. We should recognise this is the first time that Denmark has ever sent a black solo artist to Eurovision, and that's really great to see too. Well done, Denmark. See you in the final. From middle of the road to absolutely not, it is time to go to Estonia, and I am so excited to talk about this. Estonia, as it does every year, selected its entry through its national selection show Eesti Laul, and I kind of have mixed feelings about the format. I'll start with what I like, and that is that you have a televote-only super final at the end of the show. That means the top 3 overall, with the public and the juries, goes through, and then the public gets to choose its entry. It does drag the show out a bit, and it has this weird half-hour break in the middle for a news broadcast, but it puts the power in the public's hands, and that is what I think should happen at national selections. That wasn't all I liked either. I actually thought there was a decent variety in this show. There were several songs I enjoyed. It wasn't groundbreaking. There was not much of massive interest here, but it was a genuinely good show, and I enjoyed watching it. As for the not so good, I'm going to go where I go very often and talk about production here, especially in the semi-final. There were a lot of problems. One performance, which we will come on to in a minute, included this spinning camera shot, which, as this person explains, was literally impossible to do correctly. There's a quite complicated technical explanation as to why this is, but the end result is the same, that it ends up looking like a blurred mess. In addition to that, the stage at Eesti Laul is so small. Like, if you're a solo artist, great, because it's easy to fill the space. You don't have a big gaping black void behind you. At the same time, if you're a group, this rapidly turns into a cupboard. A little added oddity was that the semi-final, for whatever reason, was held in the gym at the University of Tartu. I'm no expert, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but last I checked, a university gym is not the best place to host a live performance. Another bizarre decision was to set up the national final in the way they did with regard to selection. Essentially, in Eesti Laul, there are 10 places in the final. 5 of those are predetermined by the jury that selects the 20 total songs. The other 5 are competed for between the other 15. Here's the thing. Of the pre-selected songs, 2 of them came in the bottom 3 of the final, and only 1 of them made it to the top 3. This didn't really make any sense, and to be honest, I'd rather just see a 20-song final with everyone competing than do this weird 5-15 split again, because you lost songs in the semi-final, like FOMO by Cecilia, that had really become fan favourites. There were so few places available that it meant genuinely popular songs didn't get through. All that aside, this essentially became a story of 2 songs, and needless to say, neither of them were pre-qualified for the final. First up was Ollie. He is returning to Eesti Laul after his effort last year, Venom. This year, his new song is called My Friend.
Where do I go from here? Is it the same?
This song is very stylistically similar to what Ollie brought last year. For me, it just felt a little bit weaker. I think he ended up being a little bit of a victim of his own success, because while he did well in the selection, this song was always going to be compared with his effort last year, and it really just wasn't as strong, and the general consensus across Eurovision fans, across Estonian media, was that it wasn't as strong either. Nevertheless, he still landed himself in the top 2, and he also managed to get in on the award for the most aggressive pronunciation of the word friend in history.
My friend.
However, Ollie fell short once again and was eclipsed both in the odds and in the eyes of the Estonian public by 3 minutes of absolutely glorious chaos. This selection was won by Viis and Pull-Up with their song Nendest narkotikumidest ei tea me küll midagi. That song title translates to "We don't have anything to do with these drugs." The song's lyrics essentially are the band insisting they would never have anything to do with drugs. These drugs, no, absolutely not. Nothing to do with us. No, sir. We are good, upstanding individuals who would never do such a thing. You may have noticed that the title is also very long, and it's actually so long that it is the single longest title in Eurovision history. The lyrics are equally difficult to pronounce, so it would take a complete idiot to attempt to do it at karaoke. There is a lot to unpack here, and I absolutely love this song, as you just saw, so I'm going to try and go things step by step. Firstly, I think it would be helpful to explain just how big of a deal Viis are in Estonia. They are among the biggest rappers in the country in terms of popularity. They have been around for years. They have built this huge following. When performing, they always appear with sunglasses, and in fact, it caused a bit of a stir in Estonia when, during one of the voting recaps in Eesti Laul, they took off their sunglasses intentionally in public for the first time to reveal their faces. Meanwhile, Pull-Up are a two-man folk ensemble made up of these guys. Pull-Up have been releasing music since 2018. Now, I realize a folk group and a rap group might seem like an unlikely combination, but this is so good that they're actually making an album together. That magic goes into this song as well, because it is so good. Like, I mean, ridiculously good, and I am totally obsessed with it. This is my most streamed song of 2023. It was released on December 9th, and in those 21 days, I listened to it more than any other. You remember how obsessed I was with Cha Cha Cha? Well, this was a whole other level. I have streamed this song at the time of recording 738 times. Do I have a problem? Absolutely. Will I be remaining equally deranged for the rest of the season about this? Yes, I definitely will. Am I going to do anything about it? No, absolutely not. I am just so totally in love with this song. I mean, the fast tempo, the silly dance, the folk instruments, this has everything that I look for in a Eurovision entry. It's like if you perfectly constructed in a lab a Eurovision entry that was designed to appeal to me, specifically me. They made it for me. By the way, and this is a disclaimer now, for the ESC United live streams, for the other videos in this series, do not expect me to be impartial about this song. You absolutely cannot trust my judgment because I am so biased towards it. So I'm declaring that now. This song, as well as winning the selection, was the most streamed song pretty much every single day from its release in December up until the show. On the day after the show, it actually broke the record for the most streamed Estonian language song in one day. This in turn led to a massive landslide win in the televote and to the Eesti Laul crowd making some noise for the first time in their history. This was just about the least surprising national final result of the entire season. As for how this song is going to do at Eurovision, it's actually quite difficult to say because this song was extremely divisive with the juries. In the national final, it got the most 12s and the most 1s from the juries. One thing is clear, it's going to eat up televote points. It's going to easily qualify from the all televote semi-finals, and to be honest, I could fully see it getting 200 or more in the final in May, and when that happens, I will be insufferable. One thing I will say though, although the performance being chaotic does add to this, I think it does need some brushing up in a few different ways before we get to the contests. Firstly, there were some wobbly vocals, both in the semi-finals and the final, and while I think that's an easy fix, it is something that does need to be worked on urgently. They've done other performances live of this song where they sounded much better, so I think they need to think about how they balance that with the high energy performance and the high energy dancing that we see alongside it. Secondly, while the staging did improve from the semi-final to the final, these black suits that they're wearing, it's just not distinctive enough. They'd crafted this really great visual identity that we saw in the music video that I suspect they probably didn't have the budget to recreate on stage. Now that they have the broadcaster behind them and plenty of time to prepare, hopefully we'll see something slightly more advanced in May. Overall, these are an experienced bunch of performers. They have loads of time and hopefully plenty of money to now solve all the issues I've just outlined. And to be honest, quite frankly, even if they don't, I am still going to be losing my mind to this at the jury shows in May, so I can't wait. Speaking of songs I'm going to lose my mind to in May, it's time to go to the big leagues because Lithuania have chosen a potential winner. However, I am going to make you wait another minute or two before I talk about it so we can talk about some of the other songs in this show first. One big headline was the return of the Roop with their song Simple Joy.
All my life, I've been thinking I need something more.
Unfortunately, this song didn't really deliver for me. I think it was nowhere near the level of Discotheque or of On Fire that came before it. Ultimately, I think we have to acknowledge that under the weight of expectation, the Roop did not deliver here. On paper, this song had all of the things that should have made it work. It had the quirky dancing, it had the catchy hook, it had the, in theory at least, the charisma of the group to carry it through. Unfortunately, none of these things really hit in the way they used to, and I'm afraid you can't just keep doing the same thing and expect it to work every time. Either way, look, at the very least, in the future, the Roop will be able to make a bit of money from this song by selling it for use in insurance adverts. In addition to that, at least the song was listenable. Now, when we turn to Kaboom by VB Gang, not so much. I'm not exaggerating when I say this might be my most hated national final song of all time and possibly my most hated song of all time. It has absolutely zero redeeming features. This is a perfect example of what happens when you try to be funny and it doesn't work, aka me in every video on this channel. Whether it's shouting the words chicken noodles in Korean in the chorus, or wearing 3 pairs of sunglasses, the knockoff Power Ranger outfits, or the fact the song speeds up at the end. This was a total disaster, and everyone involved in this should reflect on the life choices that have led them to this point. Ironically, the only funny thing about this was seeing just how much the audience hated it when they sat absolutely dead still for every second of this performance. Going back to songs that have actual musical value, what came second in this selection was the song Impossible by Shower.
I find it possible I will find another.
Shower are quite a well-respected group in Lithuania, and this, to their credit, was a nice ballad. I think what it was missing was the kind of wow factor that you need to take a ballad from a nice ballad to something that would be competitive at Eurovision. I think they have potential and we could maybe see them as a future entry into Eurovision, but it definitely wasn't going to be their year this year. This leads us on to the winner, and there was an important format change in this show this year, which meant that the winner was determined from exactly the same as Estonia. The top 3 songs from the jury and the public have an all televote super final. This will become important later, but for now, I just want you to bear that piece of information in mind. It's time to talk about the winner, the song that was #1 in Lithuania on Spotify from the moment it was performed in the semi-final. The club banger that we didn't deserve, but God, did we need it. It's time to talk about Sylvester Belt with his song Luktelk. I'm not going to beat around the bush here. This song is absolutely amazing. I'm going to try and put into words what I think makes it so good. We get a lot of pop songs in Eurovision, but a lot of them, to be honest, don't really stand out. You have to do something really, really special to get the audience to engage with a song like this in such a way that you can look at it and say, wow, this could win the contest. It has to be eye-catching. It has to be unique and special. This song has those qualities, and it has them in spades. This song is memorable and it's catchy from the first listen, but it also has a lot of personality. And if you see one big criticism of pop music in general, but especially this style of pop music, it's that it's lacking that. That's part of the genius of this song, that it manages to hold on to it so much. It might be a club banger, but it has this dark vibe, the minor key and the sparse instrumentation in the verses that really draw you in. It brings you a sense of foreboding and a sense of hesitancy that you don't often see in this kind of music. You don't need to speak Lithuanian to connect with this song, and the hook is so simple in the way it's written that you'll find yourself singing along to it pretty quickly anyway. What I really like about this is that Sylvester actually said he did this on purpose in order to appeal to an international audience. And I think we're going to see, hopefully in future, more countries using their native languages and using them in a way that is appealing and accessible to people who won't speak those languages. The way that the song is staged as well perfectly complements the feeling that Sylvester is trying to create. He's surrounded on stage by 4 backing dancers, and in the verses where we don't have that club beat, there is a flow and a smooth nature to their movements. When the chorus hits, their movements all of a sudden are sharp. They're in unison. It's a subtle change, but this kind of thing is what draws people into these performances, and the camera work does the same thing. In those verses, the shots linger for just a couple of seconds longer. There's none of the rapid, sudden changes of camera angle that you see in the chorus. The use of color as well in this performance is really, really clever. The verses are a deep, calming blue, and then you get to the choruses and it's red and it's flashing and it's energetic. The intensity of both is enhanced by how much eye contact Sylvester is making with the camera. He has this knack of really staring into our souls without it feeling creepy, and instead creating this strong connection. This is actually something that often artists neglect at Eurovision to their massive detriment. Overall, all of these things massively elevate the song and the performance to a level even further above the already strong base that it starts from. One thing I really want to comment on as well, that several Lithuanians on my timeline have pointed out, Lithuanians are usually pretty calm, pretty sedate at concerts. They're not the type to be jumping around, to be clapping and cheering along and standing up and really getting into the performances. Here's what they were like watching Sylvester in the super final. Honestly, the way that they're out of their seats, singing along to every word, clapping their hands, dancing, it felt really special. It almost felt like the crowd was willing Sylvester on to win the competition. Already at that point, any remaining nerves I had about this song winning went away, because you could tell it felt like the moment the country had gotten behind him. This makes it all the more incredible that under last year's system, this song would not have won the selection. I told you to remember this for a reason. They only introduced that super final this year. Last year, they did a system where the public and the jury gave a set of 12 through to 1 points each. If there was a tie, the jury determined who won. During the main part of this competition, the juries only put Sylvester in second and they put Shower in first. Because Shower came second with the televote while Sylvester won, they would have been tied on points under the old system, and Shower would have gone to Eurovision because the jury was the tiebreaker. All I can say is, I think there were probably some pretty relieved faces at the Lithuanian broadcaster after this one, because they saved themselves a riot. Can you imagine, after that reaction, if he hadn't won the show? Overall, this performance and this staging is about as strong as I think you can possibly be at this point in the cycle. It's so carefully put together by a team of people who are clearly really emotionally invested in this project. And as a result, I think this is going to have such a broad appeal, both with the public and with juries. That combination, and let's not forget, Sylvester's really strong vocal, could be enough to see Lithuania win Eurovision for the first time. The only warning I am going to put on this is that obviously that stage in Malmö has a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of features that they're not going to have at the national selection. With that comes potential, but also a lot of risks. And for a performance as complete as this one, I think you have to be really, really careful not to add too much, not to accidentally lose the magic that makes this so special. Sometimes less really is more, and I think that's the case with this performance. Luckily, Sylvester and his team have gotten everything right so far, so I trust them to make the right decisions in May. With that, we have made it through another 3 songs, and we have 3 more coming next Friday in the form of Moldova, Ukraine, and Croatia. Make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss that video. But for today, it is time to sign off. So thank you for watching and see you next week.
ikka ja suvi las on rei, kaunis mehed külas on väga okei.